Tonight, the showdown over reopening schools. The CDC now changing its guidelines after President Trump blasts them as too tough. The president threatening to cut off federal funding for schools that don't reopen. The largest school system in the country revealing its plan to reopen, but only part-time. Texas leaving it up to parents, many wondering, is it safe for kids to go back? Hospitalizations surging in states like Arizona, Texas, and Florida, and new problems with testing. Massive lines and wait times for results that take days, even weeks. The major Supreme Court ruling on Obamacare, how it could impact tens of thousands of women. The key witness in the impeachment inquiry leaving the Army, accusing the president of bullying him out. The new body cam transcripts just out of the moments leading up to George Floyd's death. He told officers, "I can't breathe," 20 times. The new protests over video appearing to show white men pinning a black man to a tree and shouting racial slurs. The major U.S. airline threatening mass layoffs. Will others follow? And the heart-stopping video, a 3-year-old thrown from a third-floor inferno, the hero, former Marine, swooping in just in time.
This is NBC Nightly News with Lester Holt.
Good evening, everyone. We begin with the question on virtually every parent's mind: when can my child safely return to school? If it were up to the president, the answer is this fall, despite the health calamity unfolding across the country. President Trump tonight rejecting the CDC's cautious guidance on school reopenings, pressuring the agency to come up with something less restrictive. The debate over what is safe for kids and the rest of us taking place as the country recorded nearly 50,000 new COVID cases just today. We have full coverage tonight, beginning with Peter Alexander at the White House.
President Trump tonight is escalating his push for schools to reopen.
Learning by computer is not as good as learning in the classroom. Our schools, we want them open in the fall.
Earlier, complaining on Twitter about the CDC's voluntary guidelines for reopening schools, blasting them as very tough and expensive. While they want them open, they are asking schools to do very impractical things. Hours later, the White House announced the CDC will issue new recommendations next week.
We don't want the guidance from CDC to be a reason why schools don't open. Every American knows that we can safely reopen our schools.
Among the CDC's current recommended policies, keep desks 6 feet apart if feasible, close cafeterias and playgrounds if possible, and teach and reinforce use of cloth face coverings. With conflicting messages, the CDC director today tried to provide clarity for schools.
I want to make it very clear that what is not the intent of CDC's guidelines is to be used as a rationale to keep schools closed.
The president is also now threatening to cut off federal funding for those that don't open their doors, although most school budgets are largely funded by state and local dollars. Pointing to students already back in classrooms in Europe, the president insists any opposition is politically motivated. The Dems think it would be bad for them politically if U.S. schools open before the November election. Today, the CDC director saying the chances of children getting sick or spreading the virus are remote.
This virus does not cause significant illness in children. We really don't have evidence that children are driving the transmission cycle of this.
But teachers' unions warn among their members the fears are real.
Nobody's going to go back full time in a situation where you can't protect their health.
Tonight, the education secretary says it's not a question of if schools need to open, but how, arguing the risk of keeping students isolated at home is greater than sending them back to school. Lester?
Peter Alexander at the White House tonight. Thanks. And even as the CDC guidelines are changing, many states and cities, including New York City, are trying to prepare their own plans to return to the classroom. Let's get more on that from Stephanie Gosk.
It's the announcement the largest school district in the country has been waiting for.
Parents want this for their children, and they want this so they can restore their livelihoods for their families. But everyone understands whatever we do has to be first and foremost seen through the prism of health and safety.
Mayor Bill de Blasio announced today that students will go back to school 2 to 3 days a week, the rest of the time learning from home. There will be fewer kids in classrooms and face masks are required. But almost as soon as the mayor spoke, Governor Andrew Cuomo said, hang on, the final decision won't be made until August.
We want to make that decision with the best available data.
A snapshot of just some of the confusion surrounding the opening of schools, competing plans and conflicting messages with parents and students caught in the middle. In Texas, the education agency mandated that schools be open 5 days a week, but gave parents the option to do virtual learning at home as well.
It truly becomes mental health versus physical health. And I don't know how to make that call. I truly don't know.
In Dallas, where coronavirus cases have been surging, the superintendent isn't sure what the first day of school is going to look like.
We will have the buildings open. I am concerned about how many students will come, and actually I'm concerned about how many employees will come.
His concerns may be justified. A teachers union in Texas accuses the state of acting intentionally or recklessly with gross negligence.
Is it fair to say that you're working on a plan with the hope that these numbers get better?
Well, but hope's not a strategy, so that's very concerning. If the numbers continue to get worse, then we have to make different decisions at that point.
That's what happened in Burlington, Iowa this week. The county canceling its in-person summer school program after 8 students arrived with fevers. A reminder that going back to school may be the goal, but the virus might get the final say. Stephanie Gosk, NBC News.
Joining us now is our medical correspondent, Dr. John Torres. Dr. John, the big concern for parents right now, as we said at the top of the broadcast, is it safe to send my kids back to school? So what do we know about how vulnerable they are to getting the virus?
Well, Lester, there's still a lot we don't know. There have been some small studies that have found children are less likely to get infected and less likely to get seriously ill. But in extremely rare cases, kids have had a serious inflammatory reaction to the virus weeks after being infected. And there have been a few hundred cases, but most have been treated successfully.
And Dr. John, the CDC says children are not spreading the virus. What evidence do they have to that?
Well, the CDC doesn't have strong evidence that kids are spreading the virus, but we really don't know because we haven't done enough studies. And since we're not really testing children, there's still a lot more to learn.
Yeah, it's frustrating how much we still don't know about this virus. Dr. John, thanks. As the school debate rages on, the U.S. has officially soared past 3 million cases. It's pushing hospitals and places to the brink. And now with a massive demand for testing, some are waiting weeks for their results. Here's Joe Fryer.
In less than a month, the U.S. has seen more than 1 million confirmed cases of COVID-19, putting a strain on hospitals.
We're full. If you come through the ER right now, it's not like you get whisked up to one of several beds.
50-year-old Steve Skinner, who had no pre-existing conditions, nearly died in a Texas hospital.
At one point, they lost me. I had to use paddles on to get my heart started again.
Nationwide, the testing system is also overwhelmed.
I got told I would get my results back in 7 to 14 days.
Lines are long, patience is short. The site in New Orleans ran out of test kits in just minutes.
I understand tests run out, but at this time we should have enough.
The coronavirus task force says the U.S. is now averaging up to 700,000 tests a day.
The states really crushed their goal in June.
But many experts say it's still not nearly enough.
We should be doing millions of tests a day, probably about 3 to 4 million tests a day, if we're going to get our hands around this disease.
The challenge is not just getting a test, but getting results, with some saying it's taking a week or longer. One company, Quest Diagnostics, says the average turnaround time for results is now 4 to 6 days, double last month. Labs across the country are experiencing backlogs, something Robert Rosetko learned firsthand.
That's where I slept for 2 weeks, in that fold-out couch.
He isolated from his family after falling ill last month, but says his test result, which was ultimately negative, took 27 days.
Mostly I was just angry, at the system that it didn't work, that, I waited 27 days.
Asking people to wait for days or weeks, in my mind, is just unconscionable and incredibly harmful for both taking care of people and controlling the outbreak.
Experts say for those who get tested, quick results are essential for contact tracing.
If you're going to do contact tracing and the test comes back in 5 to 7 days, you might as well not do contact tracing because it's already too late.
The government has invested billions in testing and contact tracing, a job that's hard even with quick results. In New York City last month, there were about 12,000 positive cases. Contact tracers were able to get in touch with more than 10,000 of them, but only 6,700 completed an interview with a tracer, and fewer than half provided information for people they could have infected, growing obstacles in a race to slow the spread. Joe Fryer, NBC News.
At the Supreme Court today, a victory for the Trump administration involving Obamacare and birth control. Pete Williams joins us now with more on that. Hi, Pete.
Lester, the court today upheld new Trump administration rules that vastly expand authority for employers to opt out of providing insurance coverage for contraceptives. The vote was 7-2, with Justices Ginsburg and Sotomayor dissenting. The court said the Obamacare law gives the government wide latitude to decide what counts as preventive care and to create exemptions from its own rules. Now, in the past, religiously affiliated employers were exempt from the contraceptive mandate, but now even for-profit companies can opt out if they have a religious or even a moral objection to providing that coverage. We'll get the final court decisions of the turn tomorrow, and that'll include the rulings on President Trump's long-running battle to shield his taxes and financial records from Congress and a New York prosecutor, Lester.
All right, Pete Williams in Washington tonight. Thank you. A key impeachment witness is retiring from the Army after his promotion was held up. Lieutenant Colonel Alexander Vindman testified in October that President Trump's call with Ukraine's leader last July was improper. He was ousted from the National Security Council after the president's acquittal. Vindman's attorney says he's the victim of a campaign of bullying, intimidation, and retaliation led by the president. We're back in 60 seconds with the tens of thousands of airline workers who could soon be out of jobs. Back now with another side of the devastating impact from COVID-19 on our economy. One of the country's major airlines telling tens of thousands of employees they may be out of a job in the coming months. Here's Jolene Kent.
Tonight, United Airlines workers are bracing for the worst. The second largest U.S. carrier warning employees of 36,000 possible involuntary furloughs starting October 1st, calling it a measure, quote, we've always dreaded, and the action that was always a last resort in the context of this COVID-19 pandemic. Nearly half of United's U.S. workers could lose their jobs. Every part of the airline would be hit hard. 15,000 flight attendants, more than 11,000 customer service and gate agents, 5,500 mechanics, and more than 2,000 pilots, along with hundreds of food service workers and reservations agents. This comes after United Airlines received $5 billion in federal bailout money earlier this year in exchange for no major job cuts through the end of September.
Unless we see a huge return in traffic in October, which is unlikely to happen, airlines will still be losing tens of millions of dollars every day. So they're going to need to become dramatically smaller. They need to cut their costs, and that's what's going to happen in the fall.
The main flight attendants union says they expect more bad news on the horizon as cases of COVID-19 once again surge across the country and demand for travel remains at historic lows.
This crisis is bigger than 9/11 and the Great Recession combined. It's bigger than anything we've ever seen before by 5 times. And what this means is devastation for hundreds of thousands of families.
United says the 36,000 furloughs is their worst case scenario as other transportation industry players are hit hard. Today, Airbus saying they received 0 orders for new planes in June, meaning more jobs could be on the line. Lester?
All right, Jolene, thank you tonight. Just in this evening, new transcripts from Minneapolis police body cams of the final moments of George Floyd's life. They reveal Floyd told the officers restraining him he couldn't breathe for more than 20 times. At one point, Floyd cries out for his late mother, saying, quote, I love you, tell my kids I love them, I'm dead. The transcripts were filed by attorneys for one of the 4 former officers charged in that case. Growing outrage in Indiana is sparking protests and demands for justice after the release of a disturbing video capturing what some say was a racist attack. Here's Steve Patterson.
Let him go! Tonight, growing outrage in Indiana after an alleged attack caught on camera.
Let him go, dude. Let him go.
Video captured by a bystander and posted online by Vox Booker appears to show him pinned to a tree on all 4s by white men in what he describes as an attempted lynching.
It was the most disturbing situation in my life.
The video does not capture what led up to the incident, and NBC News has not been able to identify the other people in the video.
Let him go!
Booker says he was walking with friends at a state park on the 4th of July when the men confronted them, saying he was trespassing.
There's a moment where a woman yells for them not to kill me. And I realize that she's talking about killing me.
Booker says he was beaten and verbally assaulted with racist speech.
You're nappy-headed.
And that one of the men yelled, "Get a noose," though that alleged comment wasn't caught on video. Booker is a member of the County Human Rights Commission, and his account has shocked the community.
I've known Mr. Booker for several years. To see what could be seen on that video was nauseating and aggravating and heart-wrenching.
This week, protests erupted.
We gathered to demand the prosecution of Vox's attackers.
The governor now weighing in.
The brief video clip that I viewed with my own two eyes was beyond disturbing.
Authorities say they responded to the scene for a report of a battery. No arrests were made, but an investigation is ongoing. Tonight, the Monroe County Prosecutor's Office tells NBC News that once the investigation is complete, it will review the case and determine what charges are appropriate.
If I'm going to be in this moment, I'm going to make sure that we bring about change and that no one else has to go through this.
Tonight, a call for justice as investigators work to shed light on a troubling scene. Steve Patterson, NBC News.
Up next, is there bias in the courtroom before the jury is even seated? We turn now to our series, Inequality in America. A new study finds issues of systematic bias during jury selection in California, in the very system that promises to be fair and balanced. Here's Miguel Almaguer.
Tonight, the demand for change is stretching beyond law enforcement and into the courtroom, where nationwide, black people are convicted at higher rates.
They're prosecuted more, they're arrested more, they're punished more. And very few people who look like them actually sit in judgment of them.
Brendan Woods, the chief public defender in Oakland, California, says it all begins with bias during jury selection.
I have an African-American woman in our office here who's tried cases, over 20 cases, and she can count the number of black jurors she's had on her jury on one hand.
Discrimination is illegal, but peremptory challenges allow the prosecution and defense to dismiss potential jurors without any cause. While either side has the right to object to strikes that appear racially motivated, Woods says prosecutors often defend their strikes using reasons that only appear race neutral.
I had a juror, an African-American woman, who was actually excluded because she was wearing what's called a puffy coat.
A new review of appeals involving issues with peremptory strikes finds prosecutors striking black jurors in 72% of those cases, while striking white jurors in less than 1%. Some of the reasons? Because they had dreadlocks, were slouching, wore a short skirt and blinged out sandals, visited family members who were incarcerated, or had negative experiences with law enforcement.
If you say that you can't be fair because you distrust the police, you're then going to exclude 98.9% of all black people from jury service. Black people, rightfully so, have a distrust for law enforcement.
The Association of Deputy DAs in L.A. calls the study flawed, writing in part, the cases examined constitute less than 1% of jury trials conducted in the state. To draw a conclusion that racial discrimination is pervasive stretches the definition of pervasive.
I've literally had jury trials where one of the jurors came in and had, tattoos across their forehead that said, F the police. That's not a juror that you're going to feel very comfortable is going to listen objectively to the testimony of a police officer.
UC Berkeley law professor Elizabeth Semmel, who led the study, also helped craft state legislation, opposed by many prosecutors and some judges, that would make many of the reasons used to defend jury strikes invalid.
The status quo perpetuates discrimination, and that it is past time to take a bold and decisive step toward ending it.
Growing calls to rebalance the scales of justice for all. Miguel Almaguer, NBC News.
When we come back, the former wide receiver and the catch of a lifetime. Whoa. Finally, more proof tonight that everyday heroes walk among us. Here's Gotti Schwartz with the story of two men in the right place with the exact right skills.
Under a burning apartment in Arizona, a sprint and a heart-stopping catch.
I just had tunnel vision on the boy and just made God help me with that catch.
The man seen clutching the 3-year-old boy named Jameson after saving his life is Philip Blanks, a former high school wide receiver and retired Marine.
We were close to the ground, man. It was a miracle.
And he wasn't the only hero that day. Nearby, another man, D'Artagnan Alexander, heard the screams of Jameson's sister Roxanne and thought of his own 2 kids.
I started to kick the door, and I kicked it in. And once I got the door open, I just seen a lot of like smoke and heat.
And you still went inside?
I just ran in there, and then I grabbed her by the arms, and then I picked her up, and she said, "Get me, get me." And then I was like, "I got you."
Tragically, the children's mother died in the fire trying to get her kids to safety.
My goal is to just be involved in both of their lives as much as possible. I want to make sure that they feel loved and that they know that their mother was a hero.
2 strangers hoping to be there for the kids in the future like they were on this fateful day. Gotti Schwartz, NBC News.
No time to think, just act. Wow. That's Nightly News for this Wednesday. I'm Lester Holt. Thank you for watching tonight. For all of us at NBC News, take care of yourself and each other. Hey, NBC News viewers, thanks for checking out our YouTube channel. Subscribe by clicking on that button down here and click on any of the videos over here to watch the latest interviews, show highlights, and digital exclusives. Thanks for watching.